I'm going to pick up a lot on where John has left off and actually look more at some more practical solutions. And I'm going to talk about the role of environmental NGOs in eco-health. It's worth saying that day to day I'm working in health, but not necessarily eco-health, but I've decided I'm not going to beat myself up about it, just see there is some room for improvement. So I'll concentrate on the benefits and disbenefits of NGOs and their involvement in eco-health, and illustrate that then with some examples from my own organisation, which is the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. So WWT, what are we? We're a UK-based international wetland conservation charity, and within the UK we manage a good number there of nationally and internationally important wetland sites, but we do a large range of conservation projects and development projects at our centres or nationally or internationally. So what's good for me is this is an audience where I don't have to say anything at all about this sort of relationship between wetlands and health, and how we see, wetlands being a source of health, but also ill health, where systems may be pushed beyond resilience and then they become a source of toxins and pathogens and so on. So we're dealing with wetlands that's very closely related to health. As John alluded to a little bit in his talk, there are some problems with working with NGOs in eco-health. I think, what's quite obvious is scale and resources obviously can limit projects, and that very often then is related to the longevity of projects. And I think the world is littered with NGO projects where there was funding for 2 years and people have come in with great intentions and maybe left with no overall effect, or worse still, actually had a negative impact. And NGOs tend to work in projects which are multi-partner and so on, and working with a lot of NGO partners, it can be like herding cats, because we very often have very different organisational aims and visions, and certainly projects which I've been in which haven't worked particularly well, it's usually because we've been pulling in slightly different directions. And as John said, that sometimes the voice of an NGO can be quite small. We're sometimes sort of saying, would you mind doing that better? Would that be all? No, okay, fine, okay, right, we can't do anything about it. But also, as John said, that sometimes that rather non-threatening voice that you have as an NGO is actually quite good at getting in and just forming those relationships, maybe with those policy advisors and so on, and without an ego in an NGO, then actually you can achieve quite a lot of change. So moving to the more positive then, the benefits of NGOs and eco-health. Of course, NGOs can be working at any level, so it might be in the practicalities, in the research, policy or practice, but very often NGOs will be your partners that are close to the ground. So just to illustrate that, for example, my own organisation, in partnership, we do a lot of constructed treatment wetlands, and of course these treatment wetlands are great for removing pollutants and pathogens and bringing all various health benefits. This particular project here in Vientiane in Laos, there's no reason why your treatment wetland needs to be large rectangular blocks of vegetation. Why not have your settlement pond like a lotus flower, or your treatment wetland then looking like an elephant? So lots of practical solutions. As an organisation, we work a lot on sustainable urban drainage systems on SUDs. Originally, I got I found it very difficult to get so excited about drainage, but I absolutely am a complete, I'm completely converted. And we know that these systems, which can be very small, are very good at flood prevention, pollution control, and so on. This particular example is in a town where I used to live, and you can see their SUDs there are really improving that housing development there by providing green space and so on, and probably psychological well-being benefits too. And we do lots of these projects then. We've got a big SUDs for Schools programme going on in London at the moment, getting lots of people involved, either in these drainage schemes or in pond creation, rain gardens and so on, getting children muddy, which I think is one of our main aims. But this is a project which is being picked up by lots of other organisations and authorities in different parts of the country. And something we're always very focused on doing is trying to share that expertise. So I've written a manual there specifically for developers, so developers know that they can integrate these sorts of things within new development projects. So we have a range of sort of development and sustainable livelihood projects going on around the world. Here's one particular one at Koshi Tapu in Nepal. I won't say very much about it due to time, but these are probably the projects we have which are closest to proper eco-health. But we're a very practical organisation. Something we've worked on a lot recently is this Ramsar Wetland Disease Manual, which is focused at wetland managers, seeing them as the people who've got a real role in sort of preventing disease outbreaks, or you know, how they decide to use their land really has a much greater impact in many ways than, you know, leaving health to sort of veterinarians and so on further downstream. So if anybody would like one of these, I don't want to take them back home with me on the plane tonight, so I've got plenty, or you can get it from our website. So moving on from those practical solutions and more now into the sort of realm of psychological health and well-being, NGOs are really good at sort of shaping and creating experiences. If any of you were on the field trips on Wednesday, then I think you would see some of those things on the ground. We've done lots of visitor segmentation at our own visitor centres and know the sorts of things that are going to make people excited about that connection with wetlands. And something that's particularly important is our centre that we've got in London, and the word oasis comes up again and again when we're doing those interviews with our visitors, for creating tranquility and calm in what is, frankly, a massive, dirty, noisy city. And just trying to change people's ideas, getting people into looking at birds. Well, how do you do that? You get them into a bird hide. Well, a bird hide doesn't need to be a boring shed. It can look like a marsh harrier on the outside. And on the inside, it can look like your living room. So this is what some of our hides look like. So they're comfy, inviting enough that that tufted duck seems to have nested and hatched out a brood of little fluffy babies there. But NGOs quite often have a sort of range of expertise, and eco-health projects have to be transdisciplinary and so on. I know within the UK, our Department of Agriculture was sort of amazed when the threat of H5N1 arose at just how much expertise existed within the country that could be tapped into. It wasn't necessarily expertise we developed for responding to a disease, but it was very valuable. So we were able to advise on, for example, the funny shaped thing is control areas around an outbreak, but also we had all the skills there for doing bird trapping, for doing surveillance, and then we're able to work with lots of organisations, FAO and so on, to go and capacity build in other countries. As John said, there's something about the NGOs which allows us to be, a fleet of foot, often small enough that you don't have to get some great directive from above, and you can take a sort of different perspective. And so we were able to see H5N1 as a really good opportunity to get wildlife health and wider health things into some of these multilateral environmental agreements, and there's a great long string of them there. Probably the most interesting and most important of all of those was the Ramsar resolution on wetlands and health, taking an ecosystem approach, which was adopted in 2012, the last Ramsar COP, and there's our colleague Pierre Horwitz introducing that. And it was a really great synergy of sort of health across the piece. I think Pierre and I were a little bit concerned at the time that contracting parties didn't really know what they'd signed up to, so we'll see in time how that pans out. I think a very important role for the NGOs is as the cage rattlers, as the agents provocateurs. We are less in need of all the diplomacy and protocol, and I was going to put a photograph in of a naked protest at a Colombian wetland, but I wasn't sure if it would offend. So anyway, if things get desperate, do a naked protest and stand in your wetland. Okay, no, it hasn't worked. Something we've been working on, I think since the beginning of time in the UK, it seems, is lead poisoning. That was a video which isn't working of a desperate and sad hooper swan with lead poisoning, but it's one in 4 of the migratory swans that goes over our post-mortem bench has died of lead poisoning, despite us having lobbied for restrictions and so on. And what we know from our research is that the regulations are being ignored. We know from questionnaire surveys and so on why this is. We know that the regulations aren't reducing mortality or morbidity from our post-mortem data sets and doing surveillance, so it really has been very frustrating. But of course the other side to this is that there are human health threats then, we know, from game consumption, and so we turned my lovely microbiology laboratory into a kitchen and did a lot of cooking up of various game recipes, and then could show that even within the UK, there's a perception, certainly within the hunting community, that data from other countries doesn't count. For some reason, lead is different in the UK. And essentially, we've found ourselves having picked a fight with the ruling classes, and that's what it boils down to. And so it's an unfortunate position to be in such conflict. And it's such a paradox for this particular health threat to those who are shooting, is that very often we look at inequity being, related then to negative health outcomes, and yet here we're talking about people who are in complete control of their health but are really actively choosing not to listen. Although within that group of shooters, of course, the population at greatest risk are the children of those shooters, who, and we know there's probably something like 10,000 children who are eating game once a week, which is sufficient then to be creating neural development problems. And they obviously have no control then over what they are being provided for their tea. So as a call for any of you who are from countries that are signatories to the Convention on Migratory Species, there's a resolution coming up at the COP in November. If you're in a position to ask your ministries to adopt this resolution, which deals with 5 poisons, including lead, then I would encourage you to do that. So just to finish off, are there opportunities for enhancing this role? And I think environmental NGOs, need to understand that they're playing a role here, but I would guard against us all kind of going, hey, that's what we're doing, a big old load of eco-health, because I think there's still quite a big gap there of understanding those robust principles and approaches, and we're going to need to know those if we are going to make the most of our potential. And I'll finish up there with a photograph which I think sums up sort of NGO. So somebody sent me this earlier in the week. We're all looking chuffed with ourselves. We've just finished our 5-year reintroduction programme for common cranes, but that's a proper NGO project. There's 3 organisations working in partnership, lots of skills, generally a bit dirty, close to the ground, but as you can see, hopeful. Thank you very much.